Are these constantly on, Jared?
No.
No? But we don't have to turn them on. We just pull them up. Okay.
Okay, it is now. Are we ready? Okay. It's now 5:32, and we are at number one, routine matters. Call meeting to order and verify quorum through a roll call. So, President Haskell, Secretary Wells,
Present.
Board Member So. They're not on there. Board Member Montoya. And I am present, so that's three.
For the record, present.
We have a quorum. And we'll go down to number two, comments from the audience. Miss Ray, do we have any comments?
We have no comments from the audience. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to our first report, 3A fundraising requests. Number one, KCHS Army JROTC Car Wash fundraiser. Fun Center in Farmington on August 24, 2024. Hold on, please. And number two, KCHS Army JROTC Four Corners Invitational Drill Competition, August 21st, 2024 by Pedro.
Yes,
Rodriguez.
greetings, board members. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm requesting two fundraisers, and thank you so much for your time today and being able to address our fundraising requests. The first one is a car wash fundraiser. We're looking at hosting next week, Saturday. This is kind of our beginning of our fundraising, working with our students, working with the community, and just being able to start so we can see how we can work the school year with all the different events that we like to attend. But of course, this year with some budget constraints, we want to make sure that we can still reach out and support all of our community service members, because we recently had a request from the Life Care Center for a veterans program, and we don't want to turn anybody down. So this is the start of just trying to make sure we're funded adequately to meet all the events that we are usually do every school year. The second request is our Four Corners Drill Meet that's hosted every year. It's usually hosted by Farmington or Pedro Vista High School. This year we have elected to host that at Kirtland Central High School. And it's not necessarily a fundraiser, but the event does have schools register and pay a registration fee. And that way the host school can pay for, we provide those students with all the trophies. We also do a hospitality room, because it takes a lot from the community to run an event like this. We'll have approximately up to 20 schools and 1,000 cadets at our school over this weekend. And so to be able to put on an event of this magnitude, we're requesting National Guard support, we're requesting parent support, and we just need to be able to fund that initial cost to make this event possible. So those are the two requests that I've submitted, pending your questions and review.
Okay. So Superintendent, did you catch that? where the host school is different, and I guess the concerns about providing hospitality room and trophies and things like that. So I guess you'll get back with.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, any questions, board members, comments?
Question.
Go ahead.
So the date, if I see this correctly, if I'm reading it correctly, for the drill competition is the 21st of this month?
No, I can't really see the document. I'm on my phone, but the date of the drill competition is October 18th and 19th.
Okay. I just wanted that clarification. I'm still waiting for my computer to load for the board docs, but on the paper that we have here, it says August 21st. So I appreciate the clarification. And I appreciate it again, as I've said before, what you do for these young men and women of our community. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think I've always toyed around with hosting a competition because I think, in my view, and I've been to competitions all over the state with our drill teams, that Kirtland has an actually ideal campus to host and put on a competition. And I just kind of want to showcase how good our school is and how well CCSD supports us. And I'm excited to host, and pending your approval, I'm excited to host and put on this event.
Very good. I've never actually been to one, but I'll certainly make an effort to get there to watch our young students participate.
We would appreciate it.
Thank you.
October 19th, the Saturday, is when all outside units will be coming in from the outside of Farmington area. So that's when we're going to have all our drill, marksmanship, fitness team events going on.
Okay, please keep us informed with those dates.
Yes, we definitely will. I apologize that the date's not showing correctly, but it will be October 18th and 19th.
Okay, any other questions, comments, board members? Okay, we'll go on to, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't want to say your name because I don't want to rename you. But thank
No
you.
problem. But thank you so much. Thank you, board members, Mr. Superintendent. I appreciate your time today.
Okay, we'll go on to item B, fundraising requests, NHS Athletics, local business sponsorships, August 21st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 by Guyla Curley.
Sorry for being in short, so I'm teacher. I ran from practice. So I have I did send a copy of the fundraising letter, the draft that I have. Do you have a copy of it?
I'm not sure. Is there a front draft? Sharon? Guyla's asking.
I just want to make sure you guys have a copy in case you need to see the wording or anything like that. Okay. Oh, but that's the request. I also sent a copy of the draft of the letter I want to send out. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So that's a letter I would like to send out to local businesses to try to solicit some donations for our athletic programs, kind of in general across the board for all of our athletics, to kind of fill in the gaps for our budget deficits. And so I requested for usage of that money for things like trips, travel, hotel expenses, food, and one other thing we are trying to do out there is trying to recognize our history, and so putting like our state championship banners up on the walls and getting more recent district championship banners and things like that, trophy case, all those good things, and put those into our new gym. So that's what I'm requesting for those sponsorships for and those donations for.
Okay, by asking this question, I don't mean to red tape or act like Navajo Nation, but this is just the day and age that, and the way things are. But have you had a legal review on your paper?
No, I just sent this in to be put on the agenda.
Okay, what do you think, Superintendent? I mean, I hate to violate HB 212.
I'm just reading it right now.
Okay,
I know we have the board attorney here as well. Slipped in the back of the room. Let me read it, and I can give you an opinion.
any other questions, comments, board members?
Comment.
Go ahead.
Just in regards to the letter, and obviously comment has already been made, to have legal counsel take a look at it and make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed respectively, that it's copacetic in its effort and use. So hopefully by that time we get back on Tuesday, we'll have a clarification to be able to act on it.
We can do that.
Thank you. Also, if I may add, I appreciate the effort and what you're doing to assist your students and the district in respects to raising funding for them. So thank you for that.
Yes, I agree.
I'm just standing here in case you guys have more questions. A little awkward, but it's okay.
Any questions, board members? Comments? I see President Haskell's on. Any questions, comments?
I'm still trying to figure out how to unmute myself. I apologize. No, I echo the same sentiments that board members already did. That thank you for going above and beyond for our students.
Thank you.
I guess sit now. Okay, thank you.
So we'll go on to item C, fundraising requests. SHS Athletics by Chester At City. Number 1, apparel fundraising online store. Number 2, donation letters and advertising to accept donation from alumni, businesses, and corporations. Number 3, fall, winter, and spring sports season tickets. Number 4, Youth and Community League for volleyball and basketball. Number 5, alumni game. Number 6, free promotional items from Elite Sports Promotions. Number 7, youth and or community basketball and volleyball tournaments with concession and door charge. Okay, Strat City.
This is Coach Claw at Shiprock High School. I don't see Chester on, but I'm the volleyball coach.
Okay, Mr. Claw,
Yeah.
I see Chester.
Okay.
He's right here at the podium.
Oh, great. Sorry. Thanks.
Are you who you say you are?
Yes.
All right.
My name is Chester At City, the athletic coordinator at Shiprock High School. A number of these fundraisers, there's 7 of them right off the bat. A majority of them are gonna all supplement funding for SHS students' activities and athletics. For the first one, with the BSN through the store, selling all sorts of apparel, shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and so forth. To help with that, that definitely will help in terms of like volleyball, because they're lacking funding. They've been on a roll lately with trying to raise funds. The second one, email and Facebook, social media, in terms of donations, again, supplemental activities for athletics and for hospitality, room for drinks, food, supplies, and snacks for the athletic tournament. And probably the biggest tournament of all is the Chieftain Invite and the Lady Chieftain Invite as well. And moving on to the third one, we have selling, well, the name of the activity is Fall, Winter, Spring Sports Season Tickets advertised on Facebook, selling season tickets during the games and during school time in the front office. Again, supplementing funding for student activities and athletics. And across the board, when we say athletics, we're spreading it across the board, not just for one, to help out as much with the budget cuts as possible. Moving on to number 4, Youth and Community League for volleyball and basketball, as advertised on Facebook. This help us get in contact with the youth and promote athletics. Does a great job with our facilities. Again, how's this funding going to be used? It's supplemental funding for SHS activities and athletics. Gift cards will be given out to the first place teams at the end of the season, season tournament on that one. Moving on to number 5. This one's going to be the alumni game. Generally, that does real well. That could be a big boost in terms of again, supplemental funding for student activities, all activities and athletic fundings. So, moving on to number 6. Free promotional items from Elite Sports. On this one, they donate t-shirts, mini footballs, mini basketball, spirit cups. Again, that would support the funding for SHS student activities and athletics. Lastly, number 7, youth and community basketball and volleyball tournaments with concessions and door charge. Again, they would utilize SHS facilities on that. Again, money produced on that would also benefit the SHS student activities and athletics. Again, we're trying to help every athletic sports across the board, and even just recently, we ran into a situation with soccer wanting to go ahead and do a scrimmage, and as we found out, there was short of budget and finding fundings. I said we need to find funding, and our financial secretary did a good job in moving money around to help them out, and I said that'll help us with Title IX. So that's a great job. And as we look at it down the road, we want to continue to assist these athletic programs and student activities, even with esports that don't generate money down the road. We want to be able to supplement them along the way, as far as student council as well, and the
I think that one's still on battery, or, yeah, I think that's.
okay, I must be drawing the energy from the battery. But yes, in terms of those 7 fundraisers, have been marked as in-school fundraisers, but with communicating with outside communities, from the alumni to businesses, to help with meet the goals of supplementing student activities and athletics.
I guess with you being in this new position, one thing that we really want to keep with is that same mascot image, and then, you know, be mindful of the rotation. That's all I have to say. Any comments?
Comment.
Go ahead.
As with Ms. Curley down in Newcomb, the same thing to you, is I appreciate the fact that you're reaching out to assist the students in their athletic endeavors, and also being cognizant of that title line and that distribution and raising those funds. But the only thing I have to add is that in the years past, during the YAFL program, the football season, do you do anything with those kids? Do you work with those programs to help raise the awareness of those programs in the community and support those young YAFL athletes?
In fact, I have a nephew that's in YAFL right now, just starting out, and they asked for me to help them out along the way. I haven't been able to fulfill that, just trying to balance my responsibilities and duties, but I look forward to helping them out and then giving them a night of recognition during the football games as well, to promote that as well. That'll promote the junior high athletics all the way up to the high school.
Absolutely, because again, that starts off with those little kids, just like the basketball programs do, and those do a wonderful job. In years past, I used to run the YAFL League here in Shiprock, and we would, on game day, we would allow, the high school allowed the kids, if they came in with their jersey, their team jersey, they wouldn't have to pay, they wouldn't be charged. And so they were recognized that way. They loved getting out on the field and being acknowledged for what they're doing. And these are the feeder programs for the high school, for the junior high and the high school. So I think it's, we need to be very supportive of those youth programs.
Oh, most definitely, I agree.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Along with this generating of money and things like that, I think in the past, I did say before that we need to put aside with coaches, you know, for example, maybe a game early in the season with Kirtland, and you know that generates a lot of money, and but they don't do that, or we don't do that because, you know, records, and but we tend to go outside, you know, travel away and things like that, and our community doesn't follow sometimes. So I think if we could bring some of that back, and you know, most of your fundraising would you know, be answered, and our concession, you know, I think we still haven't gotten to that part yet, but I really think it needs to be looked at, and where you know, it needs to be better, mainly because of safety. And so, you know, that's still on our part, and but yeah, if we could look at those things, you know, where we can generate more, and then bring people in. And that was one thing with the admission. you know, somebody wanted to go all credit card, you know, and I said, no, we still got to keep cash because we still have people, grandparents that don't have a banking, you know, they don't have that. They deal with cash only. So even our vendors out here. So, you know, I just hope we can continue to recognize that in our own community, and be aware of those things.
Oh, most definitely. We were addressing that today, so hopefully we can work towards that. We do have a lot of elderly that still use the old phone and they don't have the smartphone at all to access GoFan. So we're working towards that goal, and hopefully we can work along those lines and accommodate for those elderly that do pay only cash. Because the state tournament does operate a little bit with cash funds to sell tickets as well. So I'm sure somewhere along the way we can find a common ground.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? President Haskell, do you have any?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to item D, school board policy on section I-6500. Is that IJOA? Am I reading that right? IJOA? Field trips in section J4050, JJE, student fundraising activities by Jermaine Chappelle.
Good afternoon. Do you all have these policies in front of you on your computers? Nope. Sharon, do you mind just bringing up, we'll start with student fundraising activities. That's J-4050.
Sorry, Jermaine, but it wasn't attached to the agenda. I didn't receive an attachment.
Yes, is it possible for you just to pull up the actual policy?
Yes, let me get that up for you. Hold on.
Awesome, thank you. So my understanding is at the last board meeting, there was some interest at looking at the student fundraising activity policy and the field trip policy. I do recall that there was also some interest in the the donations, but that didn't make it onto the agenda, so we'll do that one next time. And then Superintendent asked me to provide some options, or at least to start the conversation with respect to the policy. And so Sharon, we're going to start with J-4050 JJE. And do you all have internet access?
Would you repeat that again?
J-4050 JJE. So if you all want to read along with me, and you can pull it up on your end, that might be helpful too. What I'll do is I'll just read through the actual policy. Is that what you'd like me to do, Superintendent? And then go from there? Okay. Student fundraising activity.
Ms. Chappelle, can you repeat what you said? I didn't hear it. It was kind of choppy for me.
Board President, I would. Board President, I was just going into the introduction with respect to what the school board had asked for at the last meeting, which was to begin the discussion on potential changes to student fundraising and then to field trips. And so we were just starting that.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize, board, I'm still having that back problem, so do you mind if I sit and talk to you? All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is J-4050. And this reads, and I'll start the reading of it, and then I'll talk through potential changes. In-school fundraising projects will be scheduled and controlled by individual building administrators with assistant superintendent approval. Events such as car washes and bake sales, where specific individuals and/or businesses are not targeted, will be considered in-school fundraising. Each sponsor shall submit in writing the purpose of the fundraiser with information pertaining to the method and time frame of the activity. Monies will be handled according to state and fundraising guidelines as outlined in the accounting handbook. Monies raised by student groups shall be spent to benefit those students. You can. I liked being small. Oh, thank you. If money is not spent by the group that raised it, the money will remain in the account where deposited and will be used for future student groups. Out-of-school fundraisers are classified as those activities which involve students selling products from door to door or outside of the school environment. All activity of this nature shall be cleared in writing through the assistant superintendent, and board approval shall be required prior to the beginning of the fundraising activity. The assistant superintendent will coordinate requests to minimize the number of fundraisers going on in a community at one time. To assure that the number of fundraising activities going on in the community at any one time is appropriate, individual groups with middle schools and elementary schools shall have prior approval from the superintendent designee. To assure that the number of fundraising activities going on in the community at any one time is appropriate, individual groups within high schools shall have prior approval from the assistant superintendent. Objectives for the fundraising activity will be submitted in writing to the building administrator, outlining reasons for the activity, method, and time frame. Collection and spending of monies shall follow district and state accounting procedures as outlined in the district accounting handbook. Parents and students will be informed of the purposes of fundraisers as well as any requirements for participation or consequences arising from non-participation. Fundraisers in school and out of school will be governed by the following guidelines. Sponsors are responsible for becoming knowledgeable of district accounting procedures and policies in conducting student activities. Neither student grades, transcripts, nor diplomas will be affected as a result of participation or non-participation in fundraisers. Each school's administration will attempt to meet financial requirements of activities by means of in-school fundraisers whenever possible. So right off the bat, board members, the layout of the policy itself is a little confusing. We have in-school fundraising projects, and we have kind of community-wide or out-of-school fundraising projects. And so I think one thing right off the bat that might help this be a little more clear is to make those different types of fundraising activities a little bit more clear in the body of the policy. And another option, we kind of looked at some other policies, Farmington, for example, APS. And so one possibility is that you could have the approval go through the superintendent's office for a certain amount, and then for amounts greater than that, have them come to the board. The real purpose of this policy is to make sure that the communities are not being kind of overburdened by multiple fundraisers going on at the same time, and that that's coordinated. And so that's really the intent of the policy. The policies that I did look at all kind of follow this framework. Ours is, I think, could benefit from being made a little bit more clear. In the past, we haven't always had an assistant superintendent position. Elsewhere in the policy, it talks about superintendent or his designee, and so I would recommend we make that change as well. And with that, there is one typo at the end, but we can fix that. It should be participants instead of participates. And so I'm here to just get your all's thoughts on what changes you might want to this policy so that I can bring back those options for Tuesday.
Okay, for me, I think we have two individuals here that were just talking about this topic, and that's Chester and Guyla. By reading, having that read, do you see anything, any questions? Just throw it.
I guess I can stay back here then. Whew. Okay, so my only question is that it's very limiting. I don't think I noticed that it was, one fundraiser or two fundraisers. And reading the board policy, Chester and I would actually be competing for the same communities and the same groups. Newcomb doesn't have businesses. I mean, there's one store I could ask for sponsorship out there, but I'm gonna be in the same communities asking those same businesses to fund our schools versus his school. And quite honestly, we'd have to be in Farmington asking sponsorships of businesses there that are probably also going to be asked by Shiprock and Kirtland, and then Farmington and PV and Aztec and Bloomfield as well. But that is actually something stated in my sponsorship letter, that our families also contribute to the economy of those places by utilizing those businesses. And so, that's one thing I see there, kind of freaks me out a little bit, that we're limited that much, especially with how much money we actually have to come up with to supplement what we have in our budgets right now.
I'm so glad you guys are here. A lot of times we act like Santa Fe, and sometimes we're out of touch, and we don't know exactly what you guys deal with, and so your feedback is very important. And Chester, go ahead.
I think a lot of these fundraisers that come about, especially at Shiprock High School, when we do go out there and ask for donations, they take place within the school, and those fundraisers then in turn generate quite a bit, because we do get a bigger attendance at the athletic events. So in-school fundraisers, there's a little, we do go out from time to time, but out-of-school fundraisers, those ones are really big. In fact, another one's coming up, and we haven't put in for it. That would be the Shiprock Fair fundraiser. And way back 20 plus years ago, I mean, we generated probably like over $15,000 to $20,000, and that could be used across the board for all athletics. And that's in parking lot fees, charging, people, and then running a concession stand at the same time. That, that could literally help out a lot of our athletic issues at Shiprock High, in shortfalls in funding. So as far as these businesses getting hit, somehow we manage in the past, especially when there was a time we only were allowed to only do 3 out-of-school fundraisers. And I don't remember if that was only for the fall and for the spring. It might have been for the whole school year, but we still managed at that time when things were going well. So, but in these times, I think there's a balance. I don't think we should hit these community businesses hard, and hopefully they'll be able to contribute as well.
So with that policy that was read, and any other comments or remarks, board members?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Jermaine, I didn't pick up on what you were saying at the last about the superintendent or his designee. Could you explain that, reiterate it, and explain it a little bit?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. Elsewhere in our policies, we have often superintendent or his designee. For example, you'll see that in the field trip policy, it'll say superintendent or his designee. In the history of our school district, sometimes we have an assistant superintendent and sometimes we don't. And so right now we do, so it wouldn't make a big difference. But if the school district in the future decided not to have that position, it creates ambiguity. And that's why I thought it might be helpful to have that replaced with superintendent or his designee.
I'm still not understanding, have what replaced?
My apologies, let me read it to you. So the first reference of that in this policy, it states all activity of this nature shall be cleared in writing through the assistant superintendent. And so what I'm recommending is that we change that language to reflect the superintendent or his designee.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, remarks?
Yeah, this is Matthew. So yeah, my thoughts on this is that is to really try to streamline this as much as possible to make it more friendly to student or school organizations, groups that are trying to fundraise, and not have to become a much more process that's tied up in more processes, meaning that a lot of the, at least from my viewpoint, it's the fundraiser should be, I mean, there are people at the school level that should be able to handle those without having to say, come to the board for each and every time. Because I know with the board, it does consume a lot of time, at least on our part. But I think that the responsibility should go back to the school and probably the superintendent and designee to try to help streamline and expedite some of these fundraisers and processes in the best interest of students and schools. So I'm not sure if there's like a threshold or a type of category that a lot of these happen in, but fundraisers to me are essential to a lot of these organizations. And if we can help streamline the process to make it faster or simpler for these fundraisers to get off the ground, then I'm definitely supportive of changes to policy to make it easier for fundraisers to happen.
Okay, just for history and for education, and just this one time, Mr. Sode, I agree somewhat. However, the history of board policies, if you understand how that happens, it's not our doing. It comes from New Mexico School Board Association, where it's vetted by their lawyers, and then it comes to us. So a lot of it's standard, but we can customize it and to fit our needs. So I think that's why I really valued these guys' feedback here, and it's getting harder and to do what they need to do as far as fundraise and be allowed that, but there's so many strings and not just with this immediate board, but with PED itself, and we got to comply to those rules too, and financially. So it's not all our doing, and I think to a certain extent we can ease up or make it easier, but and I turn that over to you, Board Attorney.
Thank you, board members. Before I answer that, does anyone else have comments before I kind of respond to those two so far?
In
I do.
terms of, okay. In terms of the restrictions, when you do answer the questions that came up, can you also specify the areas that have been mandated by the state and the areas that we are allowed to change?
So, okay, in lines with that, I agree as far as asking to delineate the responsibilities, but at the same time, I believe it's really an administrative decision from the superintendent or his designee to determine when and how much or approve of those fundraisers. So again, through asking that question that you did, Board President, I think that's going to help with that decision.
Thank you, guys. I think we have a good path to move forward on the questions that have been raised so far, and I think the bulk of it is to make this policy a little more easier to understand. And the reason I say that is because we have a distinction of in-school fundraising projects and out-of-school fundraising projects. And don't worry, I'm going to circle back to the state requirements in just a second. So within school fundraising projects, the policy defines that as everything happening kind of within the school building footprint. But it also says events such as car washes and bake sales where specific individuals and or businesses are not targeted will be considered in-school fundraising. I think oftentimes we do have fundraisers that come before the board that potentially really are in-school fundraisers, and maybe we just need to be a little more careful about how we define that. So I think that's potentially one way to streamline it. As I said in the beginning, the main purpose for making sure there's board approval of out-of-school fundraisers is so that we don't have, to the points from our staff members, competing fundraisers that really kind of tax our or stress our local businesses. So I think the first thing I would recommend is that we have a conversation about what you guys think should be in-school fundraisers and what should be out of school. If you look at the language for out of school, it's very vague. So essentially, the way I read the policy is anything that isn't an in-school fundraiser project would be out of school. Does that make sense? Or that targets businesses specifically is really what the language is saying. And then on to the question about what does state law require. Really the state law requirements have to do with what happens to the money once it's collected and how it's treated. There are no state prohibitions on what is an in-school fundraiser, what isn't an in-school fundraiser. And so it really kind of boils down to how the board and the superintendent want to deal with the balancing of that function.
Okay, and so on that note, in terms of audits and again with the state requirement, what do they have a threshold in because in procurement you have 60,000, you have to do this, or what is the threshold? Not that I'm saying that that we're going to have fundraising that's that big, but are there any thresholds that we have to stay under in order to get? Does it outline anything about that, or is that at the discretion of the board?
I have not found any statutory requirements that create a threshold like that for fundraising. Likewise, I don't see any actual requirements in statute. I'm not talking about potential policy, but just statute, that even restricts the amount you could have, say and we had this conversation a few years ago about what amount would be okay to be accepted as a donation versus going to the board. And I don't remember the outcome of that, so I apologize. But I wouldn't mind, I do note that Ms. Walter is here. She doesn't want to answer this question. But I think ultimately the real requirements have to do with how you account for that money and make sure you're following the government accountability standards. But with respect to everything that I've seen and the other policies that I've seen, I have not seen any thresholds.
So I'm wondering, is there something that maybe we don't know about, or from PED that could extra money in for our area? I mean, as far as being on the reservation and, limited businesses, and then we also compete with SASE in donations. And so I'm wondering too, what Zuni does. They're very limited, but is there an additional fee, or it's not till it's cut that we hear about it, So I'm wondering.
So as we know, our primary source of funding from the state comes from the SEG, and they do a per student account, essentially amount with a bunch of variables, right? I have never seen this type of variable included in the SEG calculation. I can go back and do a double check on that, but I really don't think that's the case.
How can we make it a variable?
We'd have to advocate for that at the legislature, and that is going to happen this year, because that issue is up for discussion this legislative session.
I think it's very it's needed, and something that we need to work on to make sure that our kids are not left out, because we lack businesses, and then we're competing, and then to find more businesses, we have to drive 30 miles away.
I think it's a very valid point. I mean, if you pair us against school districts like Artesia and all of those districts, their booster clubs can raise a lot of funds that we can't. And if we're looking at the equalization formula again, I think that's a very valid point that you just raised, Vice President.
And then, you know, Mr. Etcity gave the example of parking fees and things like that to generate money, but this is already a hard hit town. And so, to do something like that, you know, we're gonna have to start looking at and asking at the state level.
So I'm being funny with this response, but just have a parking lot for tourists. Have a parking lot for tourists.
You're being funny.
I am
Go
being
ahead,
funny.
Board Member Montoya.
So, with respect to what we're talking about here, obviously, I think we're all aware of and received the email about the legislative subcommittee meeting that's going to be occurring and writing and developing legislation that we can take down to the New Mexico School Board Association. I truly think and believe that the comments that have been made here would certainly justify an attempt, because again, we do have to, our students have to compete against tax-rich school districts. And the fact that the state has allowed our area and our region to be decimated because of their legislation, I mean, something has to be made up somewhere by somebody. And with those considerations, I certainly think it's worthwhile to at least put something together so I can take down there during that meeting and present to the organization as an opportunity to help our students. Because again, we're in an area that is very economically challenged. Yes, it's a regional hub. However, those that are on the cusp of that region are the ones that are hit the hardest, especially regarding our students and the closure of PNM and the tax base that we just lost through there, and the amount of people and the amount of money. What that does is it directly impacts monetary velocity and the movement of that, and it slows that down. So we don't have as much money as we used to have over the past 10 years and moving forward for the next 5 or 10. So where do we go and what do we do and how do we support our students that way?
Yeah, it's pretty sad that #1 USA team is in our area, and you know, the one that just got celebrated was Kirtland girls, and their income level is affected, you know, in that community. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to work on.
So, Superintendent, if I forget, can that be added on to include a resolution from the board to advocate for additional funding or with the SEG? And then also my recommendation from looking at the policy, it says at the very bottom, you have the 3 bullet points. And it says sponsors are responsible for being knowledgeable of district accounting procedures and policies and conducting student activities. And each school's administration will attempt to meet financial requirements of activities by means of in-school fundraising whenever possible. I think it shouldn't just be will attempt. I think that there should be a requirement for sponsors, and just as a safeguard, audit findings, etc., that sponsors, potential sponsors and school administrators need to know to be able to be fiscally responsible, because I know that that sometimes that the area is overlooked, but that should be something that's more outlined in the policy. Are there any other comments from the board members before we continue?
I'd just like to reiterate that I'm actually supportive of the position that was advocated by Board Member Montoya, and in the respect of being able to delegate more of that task to the superintendent and or the designee. So in that respect, if we're able to modify our current fundraising policy so that it's more school, student, or student group fundraising friendly, that in many respects reduces the level and time of trying to get approvals off the ground just to get a fundraiser going. I think that's policy I think we should shoot for. And as far as the board's oversight, I believe we have a lot of mechanisms such as being able to request like a monthly update on fundraising request reports as kind of like an administrative report. And in that respect, I think we should be able to trust your schools and students to handle a lot of these matters themselves, and of course trust our administrators with being able to handle this task. Because as members of the board have said, with our student groups and organizations, they're having to compete. So if we're able to craft a policy that is that helps expedite these processes as well as reduce the number and levels of approvals, I think that's a policy that we should look at and shoot for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, Ms. Chappelle?
Thank you. I have taken notes, and I'm going to bring back some options for you on Tuesday. Thank you all for your really great comments. I'm moving now to field trips. And Sharon, that's I-6500 IJOA. I-6500 IJOA.
It's coming up. Yeah, it's coming up in September.
So while you guys are looking for that, I'll just start reading so you can start listening to it. The first one starts: Central Consolidated School classes, extracurricular, co-curricular, and student organizations may participate in field trips or activity trips with the approval of the superintendent or her designee and the Board of Education. Field trips and activity trips shall be limited to activities that have a direct correlation to the instructional program of Central Consolidated School District. Central Consolidated School District shall require written consent from the parent legal guardian of the student prior to the field trip or activity trip in order to participate. Central Consolidated School District shall not sponsor senior trips. Senior trips fail to meet the criteria for field or activity trips and therefore shall neither be supported nor sponsored by the district. Companies that sponsor senior trips or their agents shall not be permitted to use school district property and or other district resources to promote such trips. District employees or students who chose to represent companies promoting senior trips shall be considered agents of the company. Companies who sponsor senior trips shall be responsible and liable for any and all accidents, injuries, suits, etc., which may occur as a result of such travel. For purposes of this policy, field trip means a school-sponsored first-hand education experience to supplement class activities for students away from the school campus. For purposes of this policy, activity trip means an experience away from the school campus that is used to reward academic, athletic, or behavioral accomplishments. The superintendent shall develop procedures to implement this policy. So before I go to the regulation, which has a lot more detail, I want to highlight a few things. In the very beginning paragraph, it specifies that field trips or activity trips may only happen with the approval of the superintendent and the Board of Education. And so right off the bat, we have a confusion because in the next policy, you'll see as I read it, some field trips can be approved just by the superintendent or his designee, and then others must come in front of the board. So at the very least, I would request or recommend, a change to that actually says field trips or activity trips with the approval of the superintendent or his designee and the Board of Education as provided in policy I-6511 IJOAR, and I'll walk you through that. So the next one is I-6511 IJOAR, and I'll start reading. Field trip means a school-sponsored first-hand education experience to supplement class activities for students away from the school campus. Activity trip means an experience away from the school campus that is used to reward academic, athletic, or behavioral accomplishments. Local. Field trips, which do not require students to be away overnight, may be approved by the building administrator. Extended. Field trips requiring 1 or 2 nights away from home must be approved by the superintendent or his designee. Field trips requiring more than 2 nights away from home or of a unique nature in destination or activity will be referred to the board for approval. Approval of intent by the superintendent. Approval of intent must be received before announcement to parents and students and prior to fundraising activities. Request for preliminary approval must include a statement of educational objectives of the trip, a proposed budget including costs to students and sources of finance, an estimate of the number of students participating, a general plan or schedule for the trip, a time schedule listing time of departures, travel, arrival, and activities. Final approval by the Board of Education. Requests for final approval must be addressed to the superintendent, be submitted before the second Tuesday of the month for approval at the month's school board meeting, and include a detailed itinerary of the trip, including educational activities, accommodations, and travel arrangements, planned adult supervision, a detailed budget, including receipts and disbursements anticipated, assurance that the above details have been provided to parents and that written parental authorization for the trip has been documented. Conditions. The ability of a student to pay costs of the trip must not be a factor in determining participation in trips during school time. Schools may organize voluntary field trips outside of school time in which student ability to pay is a factor in determining participation. Arrangements for supervision of students on extended or unique field trips are subject to approval by the superintendent. The written consent from parents must be obtained for every child participating in a field trip. Permission slips must inform parents of the following: name, location, and date of event, cost to student, mode of transportation to be used, name of the supervisor overseeing the activity, parent's responsibility. No student may participate unless a signed parent permission slip for the specific event is on file with the building administrator. The sponsor must provide the driver and/or chaperone a copy of the approved itinerary, including the routes to be followed and a summary of their responsibilities. For trips other than inter-school athletics, supervision of 1 adult per 10 students is required. Coaches, sponsors, and drivers cannot take family members on activity trips unless they are eligible. That does need to be changed to participants. Whenever possible, bus transportation should be provided. A passenger manifest must be left at the school before departure for a field trip. The use of private vehicles is not allowed. So just kind of at the outset, we've got kind of some conflicting definitions. So for example, in the first policy that we read, it states specifically that in order to have a field trip, it must be approved by the superintendent and the board. And then right off on the first page, in the first paragraph, you see that in addition, if it's just a local field trip, it can be approved by a building administrator. So I would recommend right off the bat that we clarify and make it much more clear what type of approval is needed for what type of trip. Then the next thing I would note is the sentence where it talks about what board approval is required, and that talks about any trip that is 2 nights away from home or of a unique nature. I have quite a bit of concern about what of a unique nature means, and so I would recommend that the board put some guidelines in there to determine what a unique nature is. For example, X amount of miles away from the school district, into another state or in another country, those kinds of things. And for the most part, those considerations really have to do with making sure that we're taking care of potential liability and making sure that we're ensuring safety of our students. And then throughout, for example, I know that we have forms that come through the superintendent's office I don't know that we call them approval of intent. And so I would just make, if that is the language in the policy and the board decides to keep that language, then I would just make sure that the language is consistent in actual practice. And then, let's see here. Those are the big kind of topics. What I would recommend bringing back to you guys is a little bit more of a streamlined version of this, so that it's really clear to know when you get a building level approval, a superintendent approval, or a board approval. And then obviously that we make clear, that we make sure that things that don't need to come in front of the board aren't coming in front of the board.
Are there any questions, board? Questions, comments?
Question.
Go ahead.
So the fair's coming up in October, and a lot of the schools walk their students to the fairgrounds or student day. Is that a field trip? Is that an activity trip? Granted, it's away from the school facility, but they're walking over to the fairgrounds. Or let's say the students at TBA want to go swimming, walk down the swimming pool. Is that a field trip or is that a activity trip? Does that require going in front of the school board to ask to go swimming? Or asking the superintendent, can we take our kids swimming? Or is that an activity trip? I think we need to have some kind of clarification regarding that as well too.
And so thank you, board member Montoya, for that question. And I would read the policy to say that that's a local trip because it's not an overnight trip, and it would be approved by the building administrator. And if the board decides to keep that option, I would really like a paper trail that's kind of being reported up from building administrator to superintendent's office. And then of course I would want to make sure that that building administrator option of approval was in the first policy that we read, because currently that's not an option in that policy.
I also would, in clarification, we need to outline clearly what's local. We are in a very rural area, so when we talk about local, I live in Sanasti, and local for me is Farmington, because that's the closest place that I can go shopping aside from Shiprock. So everything is local. So I think defining those areas, also clearly defining what those are.
I think that's a great point, board president, because you can go pretty far and not stay overnight.
Right.
And that's currently what is the definition of local, is whether it's an overnight trip or not. That's really the only definition attached to it.
If you don't mind, board president, I think that the terminology might need to be changed from local. I don't know what might work better, but just the distinction between overnight and non-overnight is the most important factor. And you know, if we can go down to Albuquerque and back in the same day, that's not local, obviously, but it should fit the same category, really. So I just would say non-overnight or same day or something.
And do you want, just hypothetical, is the board and superintendent comfortable, and I don't have an opinion on this one way or the other, but if we are taking kiddos all the way to Albuquerque and back, are we saying it's okay for just to have a building administrator approval on that?
I would, if I may, to your point, board president, of at least creating a paper trail from the teacher to the building administrator, and then to the superintendent saying, hey, and a lot of them do it when they go to Albuquerque at the end of the school year anyway. But ensuring that that documentation is there, the proper documentation is signed, and the superintendent is aware of it. Now, in respects to the special circumstances of staying overnight, over 2 nights, whatever it may be, on a field trip that, or sports trip that would preclude that, or you obviously include all of that, well then obviously the language should be pretty straightforward and clear to that. But I also respect the fact that you had said about the local could be pretty damn far for a lot of people. So, and that's why I asked that question. Shiprock High School, the swimming pool's on the grounds of the high school. It's not on the grounds of Eva B. Stokely or Career Prep for that matter. What if those kids want to just walk over to the pool and swim with their PE instructor, whatever it may be? Again, that's just an activity. So I think some of those things need to be clarified, and how, especially when you're using that for accountability purposes in regards to a field trip.
I also think in this, which was in the previous policy, where it says shall meet these requirements or will attempt to meet these requirements, I think again in terms of safeguarding our students and making sure that all the correct documentation is there, that again there has to be some kind of mandatory class in regards to what documentation is needed, because I know that last year we had issues even with the athletic department, and here it clearly states no one shall transport in their own personal vehicles. And so we're already, you know, looking at those things. I know some of those things kind of we're not following policy, basically. So I think, again, if we're taking field trips, the sponsors, again, there should be mandatory training on what's here.
I agree with you on that language. That has to be specific. And again, even to your point of when we look at where they're going, what they're doing, again, activity or field trip, whatever it may be, just the teacher notifying the principal and the principal notifying the superintendent by email that we have kids walking over to the swimming pool, or even from in Kirtland, wherever it may be, from Judy Nelson, because they do that on occasion, right? As long as someone's being made aware within that chain that that is occurring, I think that would suffice for a lot of those activities.
And I know that in other school districts, what I've heard, that if you don't have policies on the timeline, that the like a month before the trip, that some horror stories that they've had large student field trips with no chaperones, and students potentially getting in situations that were quite dangerous. So good thing it's not here in our school district, but I've heard of other school districts that's happened to. So something to safeguard, a time limit before field trips to ensure that all paperwork and everything's in order.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think we have things in place, and then you have all these opinions, and then it's just not with the board members, but also you have 30+ year teachers or that want to interpret their way, and so you know, I think we just have to remember that we are dealing with kids, and for the most part it's mainly their safety, and then we say all these things, and we want to streamline this, streamline that, and talk about you know, financial. To me, I just see it as well, what are we doing here as a board? If we're going to streamline this and that, and what's the need for us? And it's going to get to that point, and And I always feel that policy, and even in my work area, rules are made up because a lot of it is made up because of situations that have happened, and always results in a policy or some type of safety rule. And so I think as we talk about these things, yes, we want to do what's best, but I think we all know that that big old cloud there is that liability. And for that reason, you know, that's, I guess, really the red tape of it all. So it's not so easy sometimes.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, my thoughts, probably under definitions, I think for local, you could probably also include an activity trip, because a field trip or activity trip could be classified as a local travel.
True.
If it doesn't require overnight travel or overnight stay. So my take on this is I think if we're able to craft a policy that is more school-friendly, student-friendly, without having excessive levels of approvals or decision-making, I think it would be in the best interest of students and our schools in that respect. So like as far as like trips that are far away, like a trip to DC or Hawaii, or those are definitely going to be trips that probably come before the board for approval. But if it's like a trip to Albuquerque or Santa Fe, even like, let's say within a radius of 250 miles from the school, those trips, at least in my viewpoint, probably don't need to come to the board for approval. But if it's like a trip to DC or someplace very, very far away, then yes, those trips probably do need to come to the board.
What is very far away?
Given our area, like 250 miles radius.
But that's what I mean, you know, it's
Yeah.
up to people's interpretation, and where a teacher may look at that as very far away means Farmington,
Yeah.
or as far as your lips can point, or, you know, so, you know, we sometimes for legal reasons, we have to be very concise and clear, but, I just say common sense and, you know, and just be patient.
I think with working for the Navajo Nation, you can also go the other way and get mired in policies where nothing moves, everything stops. So I want to have like a happy medium where we do outline these things so we can make it easier for our schools, our students, to be able to participate in some of these functions. But also, if we set clear thresholds, a clear outline policy, I think it would also eliminate some of the previous things that have occurred where maybe there wasn't a clear activity buses available, or there wasn't enough chaperones or things like that. It would kind of decrease a lot of those headaches that we continue to see from time to time.
Thank you, board members, for those comments and thoughts. In addition to that, and listening to you all, it also strikes me we are in the Four Corners area, so we are surrounded by 3 states.
Sure.
And we can reach those 3 states in less than 250 miles. So just from a insurance standpoint, I would recommend that if we're going out of state, but it's a quote unquote local trip, meaning not a stay trip, that the superintendent should definitely be in that approval. Just because, you know, that paper trail is so important. If something does happen, our insurance carrier is definitely going to want to know that we were being extremely careful in how we deal with that. So
Yeah, Canyon de Chelly, Moab, Kenny Lands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Durango.
that's all like 250, even 300-mile radius.
Bloomfield. Okay. Is there anything else? We're still reading along? Okay.
No, we're done reading.
Okay.
I did note that on the agenda, the donation one didn't make it on the agenda, so we'll have to move that to next week.
Sounds good.
I'm up on the next one, but you're gonna be potentially happy with me. This is talking about Title IX. Unfortunately, this is still in flux, and it's very controversial. And so as I was reading through it, I'd rather that conversation be an executive session so that we can have a really good conversation on attorney-client analysis. And so that would be my recommendation, that we move that to the next meeting for executive session.
Sounds good. Are you, board members, are you all in agreement? Yes?
I certainly don't want to read that whole thing. It's 97 pages.
I won't read it out loud, I promise.
I've gone through some of it and then gave up.
Just for
but
that, I think we should read it. Yeah.
You read it. One thought that I had, and I know that this just an idea, but if we're saying what's local and what's can be authorized by an in-house administrator, we could take into consideration that anywhere within the school district could be a local. I know as far as Kirtland's concerned, Farmington's pretty close. You know, if we're going to Nash City, that's 70 miles away. But anyway, just a thought. Within our school district could be something that
Would, Ms. Chappelle, would you be able to look into what would be reasonable in terms of local? I like the suggestion about overnight. I also like the suggestion of having a mile radius, something.
And I actually think the idea by our board secretary is a really easy fix to that, quote unquote, because a trip going to Albuquerque does involve buses and all sorts of things, and so that would be definitely something from a paper trail standpoint. I would recommend at least have the superintendent's approval on it. So that is a really easy way to deal with that local requirement.
Okay, great. Yeah, sounds good. Are there any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, and even as I said a little earlier, regarding just some of those activity trips, just an information trail to let him know that there's people and students that are going to be leaving the building or the grounds of the building, even just to walk over, like I said, from Judy Nelson to the pool, that he's made aware of that. So, I mean, that's certainly didn't take an act of Congress or the board to say yea or nay, but certainly if that's at least acknowledged in that people will understand this is what they need to do.
And I know the policy also talks about the superintendent providing a report, I think it said,
yes,
of field trips. That's also something we could build in so that the community as a whole has access and hears about what our students are doing. And then the other thought process, or the other thought I had was, it does talk about the superintendent actually developing procedures to implement the policy. And I know we have some of these things written down, especially with our forms, but if we do kind of formalize that, we can put it on the webpage and bring it back to the board as well. Superintendent, that was just another thought. That's all I have.
Okay, and maybe if we can also, to fit those criteria, to also develop the training, and then to relook at the form to complement all of this. Matt, turn off your dryer.
He's landing.
So, all right. Are we on to F? Yeah, we're gonna put letter E to save in for executive session for next, on Tuesday. F, 2024-25 contract for childcare component between New Mexico Grad System and CCSD. Mr. Gallagher? Oh, there he is.
Good evening.
Okay.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, President Haskey, board members, Superintendent Carlston, and my esteemed colleagues that are there tonight. We are fortunate to once again be partnering with grads, and it turns into two components, one for supporting childcare and one for supporting the students who are taking the grads program. They've been very good to us. They've provide support and they provide some money. So in a year that, you know, budgets are tight, it's nice to have a little extra cash. So that's very good. Do you have any questions on what we've used this before or what we might be using it for this year?
If you can give us a summary, that would be
Okay.
great.
So on the daycare side, a lot of times we help supplement the snacks and things for the kids. We use that there. We've also used it to buy car seats to give out to the teen parents, and just, you know, just general small reimbursement things. On the other side, on the that's that one. I guess we can wait till the next one and I can talk more about that part of it, but that's what we've used it for in the daycare side.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay. You can continue.
What, I have a question. So along with that, childcare and providing those snacks and whatever, do you also provide when they're not in school or over the weekend? Is that something that's possible?
Yes, we can do that. We can also partner with the ICO, and they do snack bags that the kids can pick up, backpacks to take home over the weekends too. So we've got a couple different things we can use there to help support those students that need a little extra assistance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Like item 11.
Do you have a question?
No, I think I like item
Oh, okay.
11 there.
Okay, it's pretty good. Thank you.
I do have a question.
One question. Go
My
ahead.
apologies.
No problem.
How are you in your capacity with the number of children that you're attending to currently?
We're pretty full right now. If we get any more, I may have to look at using one more, opening the one more position that we do have available. But for right now, it kind of depends. We've got two teen parents that we're still waiting on. If they come in, then that would put us a little over for our 4-to-1 ratio that we're trying to stay at to maintain our 4-star rating on our daycare.
Okay, thank you.
And what is capacity?
Capacity is 4-to-1, and right now I've got 2 full-time workers and a director. So we're running up right now, I think around 6 or 7. So we're pretty close to capacity. The state's pretty tight on us on how we supervise the kids and who's in there and not. So we try to make sure that we're within there. And like I said, we're proud of our 4-star rating, and we want to try to stay there.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any other questions or comments, we will move on to letter G. Mr. So, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
G, 2024-25 contract for grad instructional components between New Mexico grads and CCSD. Again, Mr. Gallagher.
So this is the classroom component. We have a teacher that works with the daycare. And so the kids, you know, they can bring the kids to the daycare, and they're also taking a class in school. And even if they've had it once before, we try to get them back in again and make sure that they're getting support. They're learning about, you know, child development and parenting and doing those things. So some of the things we've done with that, we've supported them with supplies and necessary things there. But we've also used it to take kids to the Winter Express in Durango, have the both parents and the child, you know, and plan a trip and go there, and have done some things like that. We've gone to Farmington to I guess they've got a trampoline area and stuff, and done some things like that to kind of build some camaraderie between our teen parents and have them supervising the kids at the same time.
Great. Are there any questions, board members? Or comments?
No questions.
Secretary Wells?
I have none.
Board Member Montoya?
I have none.
Vice President Aspas?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. We appreciate you working with us on these so we can keep supporting our kids.
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, letter H, school handbook by Peter Deswood.
Yeah, we get that handbook.
Dane, we can hear you still. Good evening, board members, Mr. Carlson, colleagues, anybody listening, watching out there. So I'm doing the handbook updates. I know we presented this back either in May or June, and there were some questions about it. I did get back with principals, elementary principals, middle school principals, and high school principals. This was sent to them to update anything that needed to be updated. I did touch base with them. The only changes or updates that were made to the student handbooks were any dates, like last year it said 23-24. They updated to say 24-25, and then they corrected any typos within the documents. Many of the items that are in the handbooks are aligned to board policy. So in fact, one of them said activity trips, right, or field trips. So if the board policy changes, then the handbooks will be updated to reflect what the changes that are made to the to J 6511 and I think or J 6500. So if those are updated, then those will be also updated in the student handbooks. But it's very nothing, like I said, nothing has really changed from last year to this year. I do stand for questions.
Question.
Go ahead.
Superintendent.
Sir.
So this goes back to when I initially asked that question, that there's one handbook for the elementary schools, one for the middle schools, and one for the high schools. Is that what we're being told, that the changes as for the dates themselves were being made to cover all those areas, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So there is one page that is left blank. Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, there's one page that is left blank where the school staff would put, of course, their contact information in there, like principal and then probably the staff members.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. So?
I have no questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I, outdoor learning grant. Ms. Renner?
Hello, good evening.
High school board and superintendent and community. I'm Lisa Renner and I work, I'm new to your district. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So I am new to your school district. I started working with you in July and I come from a school in Farmington where we started the community school grant last year. And so now we're working on different kind of community projects and I'm an ICO. And I wrote a grant when I arrived from the public education department. I applied on behalf of Mesa Elementary, and we're also going to collaborate with OHO and the middle and elementary schools in Newcomb. And so I applied for this grant from the New Mexico Public Education Department called Outdoor Learning Startup Grant. And if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. They had a request for applications and it was due July 18th. So I sent in our application and it's going to be, the funding is going to be for project-based learning at the schools. And we're going to partner with Zach Ben over at Biddy Baby Foods in Shiprock and Cuddie. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. And it was good to listen to the information on field trips. So planning, hopefully in the spring, we're going to meet with Zach next week and hopefully planning a field trip for some of the schools to go over and see the farm and learn about the different kind of planting methods and things like that. Also, Zach will do a traditional food preparation demonstration where he'll talk about how to make, they're a company that makes baby food. So they're going to talk about how they make their baby food and also demonstrate how they make like a corn stew for older people. So baby food and older people. So it'll be culturally relevant. It'll have learning in place and project-based learning. So I'm very excited to do that. You can go to the next slide. So the goal of this project is to, of course, increase knowledge of the connection of agriculture and food for children so that they see where their food comes from. Part of the grant also is going to fund some container gardening, and that will, teachers will be able to connect that with their science standards, right? Because every grade has something about whether it's compost or photosynthesis or the food cycle or anything like that. They can kind of apply that with some real hands-on learning. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions about this grant or?
Board members, do you have any questions or comments?
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
I just appreciate your attentiveness to hit the ground running from the time you came into the district to be able to do this. That's very impressive and obviously very forward thinking to assist our kids in these communities. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited. It's a small grant, but I'm hoping it'll kind of, using that metaphor, right, plant a seed and we can get more partnerships like this and grow more in the direction of this sort of project-based learning and learning in place. And so, yeah, I'm excited. So thank you for that.
I have a question. How much is the grant for?
That's a good question. So I looked at the former grants, right, that they had awarded. This is not the first year they did an RFA. And they were about 30,000, so I asked for 28,978, and that's what we were awarded. Okay. So it's not a ton, but it's enough to get started and do some things. So,
is it reoccurring so you can reapply for it next year?
I can't. I think so. They call it a startup grant, so that leads me to wonder. And I did ask what's next on there, and I'm not sure. The person who had referred me to this wasn't sure what'll happen next from it, but if it's available, I will apply again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. So?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
J, request for disposal of surplus property, IT data department. Yay. Mr. Leandro.
Good evening, Board President, Board members, Superintendent Carlson, and audience. Actually, this is a continuation of my presentation from last month in our IT disposal process, where there are 12 pallets of desktops, and 10 of those are coming from Shiprock area and Kirtland area schools, and 2 of those are coming from Newcomb and Nash City areas. And then There are also 30 charging HP cards that needed to be disposed as of this time. And again, our warehouse supervisor, Shiba Joe, is online. So if you have any questions, all those devices are stated in the document. That's why it started with pallet 12 up to 21, and then NC1 and NC2. This is because that's a continuation of last month's presentation.
Are there any questions or comments, board members? I don't have any questions either.
No question.
I asked for 5 minutes, but that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. K, 24-hour deposit by Miss Allison.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Carlson. So the first one we have here is going to be the 24-hour deposit waiver. It's a waiver request. So I provided a PowerPoint in your packet that gives some background on what the finance department is requesting. So we're requesting for board approval to have us send the waiver request letter to the public education department for our deposits. So within the statute, we're required to deposit within 24 hours of receipt. And so requesting a waiver gives us additional time, up to 72 hours. So that's the request that we're sending, or we're requesting. And then on the slide, I also include what the current process is, and then with the waiver, the timeline onto where we're requesting the additional time. And this really applies mostly in our Newcomb and Nashville area schools. So with them being more remote and not so close to a bank, it'll give them more time to be in compliant with the 24-hour rule.
So with this waiver, this would be for this school year?
Yes,
current
it would
school
be
year.
for the current school year.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
No, other than to ask that there really shouldn't be any changes to the documentation unless the PED makes changes.
Yes,
Would that be
that's right.
correct?
Yes, everything remains the same, the compliance piece, the handling the cash, the documentation, all of that remains the same. All it is just adding, making it an exception for us to still be in compliance.
For time. All right, thank you.
Secretary Wells?
No, this looks like a continuation of what we approved last year. Looking over it, I can't see anything different than what we approved last year. So.
Yes, we have to request approval every school year.
Okay. All right, Mr. So, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, no questions or comments. Thank you. Oh, you're on the next one.
Yeah, I have a few more letters.
Okay, POs over 60,000 and 3,500 to 10,000 July report.
Yes, a monthly report for all POs issued that are $60,000 or more. Now this it's a standard long list at the beginning of the school year because we just started our fiscal year in July. So it's for any new purchase orders that are requested for some of them are going to be for the whole entire school year for just regular like utilities or bills with like cell phone, propane, so regular standard utilities, internet.
Board members, any questions or comments?
I have none.
No, I don't. No questions.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Next one is the POs, or I'm sorry, the utilities comparison report.
Yes.
So with this one, it's gonna be the utilities for the month of July.
Is there supposed to be a comparison?
So there wasn't, so when I presented last month, there was the 5-year, and
Yes.
because that was at the end of the fiscal year, there wasn't, no information
Okay,
for
so
the month of July.
So this is just a summary of this month?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Or July?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Looks straightforward. No questions? No questions or comments. Thank you. Next one.
Next one is gonna be
accounts payable disbursements.
So, Sharon, there's the board report summary. If you can bring that up, and I can go over those numbers. With the detail are attached to the board packet with the information. So with our accounts payable disbursements for the month of July, our operational account, we have 1.5 million. And our activities account, it's 2,732. And our outstanding check listings, the total for July is $341,399. Activities is 2,732. And then our expenditure reports for funds 11,000 to 23,000 is 2.3 million. Of that amount, 1.1 is under the impact aid operational. Grant expenditure report for funds 24,000 to 29,000. Grand total is 627,000. No disbursements for Carl Perkins, JOM. It was $1,702 for expenses. And then impact aid 25147 is $411,853. Capital outlay and debt services, we had expenditures for 3.7 million. And then on the revenue side, for the general funds, our total revenue was 5.4 million. Grants, funds 24,000 to 31,500. Total expenditure is 4,064,000 with JOM expenditures of 32,528. Capital outlay expenditures, $26,038. No expenditures for impact aid, 3,500.
At the very bottom it says budget adjustment requests.
Yes, that's the next letter. Oh.
Any questions before we move on to the next item, board members?
I have none.
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions. Please continue.
Okay, so the last item for me, O, for budget adjustments is gonna be for $300,000 for the Kellogg grant. And And this is gonna be for our allocation for the 24-25 school year. And it's a 2-year grant, so it's gonna be, $150,000 for each year.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have none.
Mr. So?
I don't have any, thank you.
I don't have anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going on to item number 4, executive session. A, convene executive session, discussion on collective bargaining agreement as permitted under NMSA 1978, section 10-15-1, H5 of New Mexico Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
And a roll call vote, Board Member Montoya?
Yes.
Secretary Wells?
Yes.
Board Member So?
Yes.
And I vote yes to go into executive session. Where do we go into executive session? Here, or should we go into?
Board members, I'm not on, so we're gonna go in there.
E, reconvene in open session stated that the board has discussed in executive session only the subject identified in the agenda as a reason for which the meeting was closed. Discussion on collective bargaining agreement as permitted under NMSA 1978, section 10-15-1, H5 of the New Mexico's Open Meetings Act.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. So,
I vote yes.
Mr. Montoya,
Yes.
Secretary Wells.
Yes.
Vice President Aspis.
Yes.
And I vote yes. C, possible action items on matters discussed in executive session. There were no action items. So 5, we'll move on to 5 items for the August 20th, 2024 regular board meeting. Are there any items you want to add to Tuesday's meeting?
Not at this time.
I have the, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to get on to that, really quick and create a variable for the, what was that acronym? SEG?
Oh, SEG, yeah.
And see if we can get, money for our athletics. And then, I want to know what's going on with the bus stop lighting. And, I mean, that is ridiculous.
Are the parts still coming from France?
No.
Should have asked them to bring it back from the Olympics.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So, okay, that's it.
In terms of that, legislation for the SEG, it's due with the NSM New Mexico School Board Association by the 19th.
I think it's the 19th.
I thought it was the 7th. Wasn't it the 7th when it's
7th or
due?
9th? 19th.
9th or 7th?
Ninth.
It's due on the 9th, before the next board meeting, so.
Of September?
Of September.
Okay.
Unless we do a special board meeting to approve that resolution.
I can draft a resolution that supports making modifications to the SEG that helps us, not just on athletics, but in other areas as well, because we've been talking about that for Tuesday, so that we have it ready to go.
Okay.
Does that work?
That works very well, thank you.
I will be more than happy to read that into the record.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then
Superintendent, I may need to meet with your interim finance director on some of that, if you don't, if that's possible.
Yeah, 'cause you're gonna have me upset.
I would also include the, in terms of that, for the full funding for impact aid and full funding or the verbiage in terms of, not full funding, but the
Forward funding.
the formula, to also look at the formula funding for JOM and to increase the funding for rural areas. So those 3 resolutions to push through.
Before that happens too, we might check with Zuni to see what they do. As far, they might be being given a multiplier or something.
I can definitely reach out to Martin.
Okay, that's all I have to add. Is there anything else? Board members, so do you have anything to add to Tuesday's meeting?
No, I don't.
Mr. Montoya?
I believe the superintendent has it too. She's already aware of them.
Mr. Wells?
I have nothing.
Okay. Anything else? Secretary Aspis? No. I do not have anything else aside from those resolutions. Alrighty.
Just quick clarification, we are gonna have executive session again on
Yes.
CBA, just so that Sharon can hear it.
With Title 19.
And
Also,
Title 9.
Not 9 or 19? 19, right?
9.
Oh, okay, 9.
Might as well do
Sorry.
19 too. Let's do them all the titles.
Okay, Title 9 and the continuation of collective bargaining executive session for Tuesday also. Number 6, a motion to adjourn the work
Motion.
session.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. So,
Yes.
Mr. Montoya,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Aspis,
Yes.
and myself, yes. At 8:55 p.m. we adjourn. Be safe, drive safe.
Jerry wants
Yep.
me to
Take care.
say that.